A few more poems after my retirement, but never like it was then. 1935, Black Man's Verse. 1937, I Am the American Negro. 1948, 47th Street. And then we moved to Honolulu.
When I first met Frank, I felt that he was very, very tired. And he very truthfully said that he and Helen, his wife, had come from Chicago because they were tired of fighting prejudice. They were tired of fighting battles on every front, and he felt that Hawaii was the ideal place for him to come and get a rest. He had heard about Hawaii from Paul Robeson, who had just come to Hawaii to complete a series of concerts, which we had sponsored, incidentally. And I think he knew Paul in Chicago, and Paul said to him, look, you must come to Hawaii. That is a very wonderful, wonderful place. We were, as a matter of fact, then on the eve of the very long longshore strike. And it happens that Frank, after all, wasn't anyone to walk away from the fight. The Honolulu Record had just been started by a young man who had come back from the war, Koji Ariyoshi, who has since died. And when Frank came here, the paper had just been in publication for a short period, and he joined the staff, and he wrote some very, very prescient articles about race relations in Hawaii. And given the fact that Frank, a black married to a white, had come from that kind of situation in Chicago, it's utterly amazing how he was able to size up the race relations here in the state of Hawaii, in the territory of Hawaii. As a matter of fact, one of his articles ended with this phrase: these beautiful islands can still chart their own future. I'm not sure that Frank would agree that the future which we have since charted has been a good one or a bad one.
Soothed by the yellow hand of the Hawaiian sun, the mountains drowsed like tired gray men on the front lawn of the old folks' home. Then the strangers came. They loosed their chained terriers of pineapple and sugarcane, sent them boldly into the yard to sniff with eager green noses at the sleeping old. Long since, pine and cane have taken over the front lawn, snapping impatiently at obstructing ankles. They run between the tall, still legs of the motionless mountains as if they originated here, and the silent ancients were usurpers. Here in this cultivated place, growing the soft brown rose of Polynesia, the dogs have scratched, digging for the buried pot of cash returns, killing the broken bush under the flying dirt of greed and grief. Annoyed by the yapping pair, an old man turns in his slumber, and the land slides on pine and cane. He sits tall in his chair, and the rains beat down. He rises in explosive anger, and the lava breaks loose from its chains, the smoking monster subduing all who dare disturb the rest of Mauna Loa, Kilauea. There is none so patient as a tired mountain drowsing in the sun. There is no wrath so great as that of a mountain outraged, destroying the nipping dogs loosed on the front lawn by the strangers. His sexual politics, if you will, is an area that has been unexplored. I know that he has a series of unpublished poems called Horizontal Cameos, written about working women, that is to say prostitutes. And yet his presentation of them is lacking condemnation and rather seeing them as a product of society, and why perhaps they have chosen or been forced to choose this way of life.
Betty, having reached her goal of $100 grand in cash, Betty quit the business and Boston at 35 and moved to California devoting her ample leisure to a church home for wayward girls. Winning the respect and interest of the director, whom she married, thus providing, unintentionally of course, funds for her husband on his business trips to spend in the whorehouses of San Francisco.
Rita. One big difference between Hollywood and Honolulu is that in Hawaii, I know what I'm getting. In Hollywood, I put promises in my purse and smiled as if content. Maybe this guy really had connections in films. Who do you say no to? How do you tell which shell the pea is under? Gals like me are a dime a dozen, and for free. But in Waikiki, I'm something special to the Midwest tourists and the Oriental trade. I'm only a little busier, use fewer tranquilizers, and have more in cash than the average starlet. Anytime they ask, I'll be happy to contribute substantially to the Hawaii Visitors Bureau.
Louise, orphaned at 14, pregnant at 15, unwed mother at 16, and a pro at 17. Louise, as justification, told herself and clients there was no other way to support a child. With a handful of sleeping pills, she ended it all at 22. Nobody ever knew whether it was grief over the death of her daughter from pneumonia 6 months before, or the demise simultaneously of her excuse.
Here is a man who is not just a poet, set away from the world, but here is a man who was able to make that complete transition between what has generally been felt to be a completely literary ivory tower world with what was going on out there, where people had to earn a living, where people had to fight prejudice, where people had to go all the way in order to get a measure of equality. And I think this is the wedding, for example, of the pure literary person with the activist person.
Frank Marshall Davis, I think about younger poets who learn from you, your life, through your voice. I read a poem and play it through and through like a record album as something you composed for us. Who says there's heaven or hell? With me here in my armchair, I have not waited for you to visit. I have turned on the television with my remote control and have been in touch with the universe, which is nothing but white noise. And when you all arrived wanting me to read my poems, I did not weep or cry out with joy, for here I am in my chair, and I am now ready to jump channels with one more touch of my hand. In July, in the late evening off Kapiolani Boulevard, in your cramped second-floor cell, I imagined you a flash of trembling light, and then you changed stations on all our televisions.